Imagine you're speeding down the highway, and after just one look at the speedometer, you're suddenly lost. Seems unlikely, right? Well, to understand why, we first need to look at what particles and waves really are. A particle is anything that has a specific position. This means we can define it in our three-dimensional world with coordinates as to where it is. Waves, however, aren't so simple. See, unlike particles, waves don't have a specific position. They are more so a disturbance rather than an object, but due to this, we can measure their velocity. But what do waves and particles have anything to do with you speeding down the highway? Well, everything in the world is both a particle and a wave at the same time. Wait a second, didn't we define waves and particles to be two different things? Then how can one object be both a wave and a particle at the same time? Well, it's because when we look at our everyday things, such as a ball, the wavelength of the wave is so small that we barely notice it. This is because it has such a large mass, which means a higher momentum, and momentum, being related to wavelength, means it has a small wavelength. Rather, we see these everyday objects, as particles we can define where their location is in our 3D world. But when it comes to tiny objects, such as electrons and photons, the wavelength of these waves is large enough to measure. It's these objects that we can see as both particles and waves. But as we said before, we can't measure how fast a particle is going, but we can measure where it is. And we can measure how fast waves are going, but we can't measure their position. So what does this really mean? Well, when we start to measure tiny objects, such as electrons as particles, we start to see their location. But as we start seeing these objects as particles, we won't be able to calculate their velocity. If we start seeing them as waves, the less we will know about them as particles, and so we won't be able to know their exact location. This is what the Heisenberg Uncertainty Principle states. The more we know about the position of an object, the less we know about its velocity. And the more we know about its velocity, the less we know about its position. And so, as you're cruising down in your car, you don't have to be worried about not bringing a map with you on this cool road trip. Instead, you should look outside and breathe the nice fresh air wherever you are.